After 12 extraordinary days in the Middle East, the crisis, which began with Israeli military and intelligence operations on Iranian territory and ended with an attack by American military forces on Iran's main nuclear facilities, now appears to be subsiding. United States President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire last night, which was later approved by both Israel and Iran, although not without final attacks from both countries and casualties. But Iran is already broadcasting that it is even more determined to develop nuclear weapons. And Israel, having gained air superiority over Iran, is making it clear that the war is not over yet and will definitely continue. In this episode, just like in the previous one, we will analyze the results of the 12-day war together and answer the main question: why is this far from the end? And why should Trump be wary of his own statements that he has built a new Middle East? My name is Alexei Pechi. It's June 24th on the calendar. We'll get to everything in order, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment you want. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, on the morning of June 24th, Trump expressed disappointment, saying that neither side at this point understands what the hell they're doing, and called on both sides to stick to his ceasefire plan. The precondition for this ceasefire was a direct United States military attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. And it's important to note here that in order to avoid a major confrontation and a prolonged war, it was crucial, before Trump gave the order to attack, to be on the same page with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. To make it clear that the American attack was meant to signal the beginning of the end of this war, not the start of a new phase, and to effectively deter potential Iranian responses. Overall, that's exactly what happened. Iran responded to the first ever direct United States military attack on the very heart of Iran, with a rather limited and carefully measured response. According to Donald Trump, Iran launched 14 missiles at United States military bases in the region. They even warned in advance when and where they would strike, so that everyone would be prepared to repel this attack. And, it's hard to underestimate the significance of this now broken taboo in United States policy, because Iran now clearly understands that the United States can and will penetrate deep into its territory when necessary to protect American interests. All those proxy wars are a thing of the past. No one will be fighting with the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, or the so-called militias in Iraq and Syria anymore. Now it's clear who's behind it. That's why they'll be targeted. For a long time, Iran believed that relying on asymmetric proxy warfare would allow it to avoid retaliation within its own borders. What could suffer? It would be Syria, Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, Iraq, and so on, but definitely not its own territory. Now that belief has been completely shattered. In 12 days, Iran lost almost all of its air defense, most of its missiles, the launchers needed to deploy those missiles, and the factories needed to build those missiles. A tier of its military command, its crown jewel nuclear facilities, along with its leading nuclear scientists. The Iranian leaders who are still alive know this. They are alive only because Israel and the United States decided to spare them, including the supreme leader himself, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It's not because Iran somehow managed to withstand the attacks and prevent the elimination of the country's top leadership, but precisely because Jerusalem and Washington decided to stop and not overthrow this regime. And by the way, I'll explain why a bit later. But now, the main question is whether this tactical success will turn into a strategic achievement. How can we even define the strategic goal of the United States and Israel? It's the guarantee that Iran will never dare to even move toward nuclear weapons again, or accumulate highly enriched uranium with advanced centrifuges beyond any conceivable version of that so-called civilian nuclear program. It's the guarantee that Iran will never again rebuild a massive missile arsenal to threaten Israel and United States personnel in the Middle East. It's a weakened Iran that cannot or does not want to rebuild and support its terrorist proxies throughout the region, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in the Gaza Strip. If these three pillars remain unbreakable, then we can say that the United States and Israel have truly won. There is still one more question. That's the very regime change in Tehran. Here, we shouldn't forget that the United States, as a key democracy, leaves this question to the Iranian people themselves. And in this, the United States can help the Iranian people themselves if they really want to overthrow their own regime. As you know, the United States has already done this in the case of the overthrow of Mossadegh. So this has already happened in history, which is something I would pay attention to. In the coming weeks, air superiority, that will be the key issue. Here we need to go a little deeper to understand the full context. After the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, Israel's national security doctrine is to respond to any threat before it becomes a reality. For example, weakening Hezbollah in Lebanon. And it was dictated by exactly these considerations. This also explains the logic and impetus behind Israel's military operation against Iran over the past 12 days. In simple terms, once Israel gains an advantage over its opponent, it will not easily give up that advantage. If you look at the ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah, which was signed just a few weeks ago, you'll see that Israel officially reserved the right to patrol Lebanon from the air and the right to attack Hezbollah. If they think that it is plotting something against Israel, the same will now apply to Iran. Therefore, Israel will do everything it can to maintain dominance in Iran's airspace. And if Iran tries to counter this, new Israeli attacks cannot be ruled out. Air superiority, even after the war is over, is not just empty words. If Iran tries to restore its strategic air defense missile production capabilities, or in the most serious case, its uranium enrichment facilities, then we can assume that Israel will take military action against such restoration, which means that Iran will have a hard time recovering militarily from this 12-day war. That is, accordingly, Israel will continue to monitor what is happening in Iran from the air, among other things. And it's also important to note the ideological issue, because this war has dealt a serious blow to Iran's revolutionary system in all 46 years of its existence. The whole idea of the Islamic Revolution in Iran was built on fighting against whom? The United States of America, which they call the Great Satan, and Israel, the Little Satan. And here they just got slapped by both of them. On the other hand, we shouldn't rule out the possibility that the humiliated regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei might decide to secretly develop nuclear weapons as the only option for survival. And in the coming week, we will most likely find out more about what is actually left of Iran's nuclear potential. This will be an area of intense focus for American and Israeli intelligence specialists. Although now there may be internal debates in Iran about whether it's even worth restoring their uranium enrichment capabilities. Because it's a huge expense, even greater isolation, and a huge risk of repeated strikes from the United States and Israel. Now it's no longer taboo, and no one will hold back anymore. They will strike directly at Iran. And here we've come to Donald Trump's favorite topic. Ultimately, the only way to fully guarantee that Iran never gets close to creating a nuclear bomb is, on the one hand, extensive intelligence work that should never stop for even a day, and a diplomatic agreement that guarantees full access for inspectors and strict limits on any nuclear activity that is not intended exclusively for civilian use. If none of this happens, Iran's activities will continue, but in the shadows. And now finally some interesting details have come to light, only now. It turned out that before the 12-day war, the United States actually offered Iran to keep its uranium enrichment facilities above ground. By the way, Iran could have made a good profit from this. The idea was as follows. The United States, Iran, and several other countries would create an international consortium for joint fuel enrichment with full transparency and monitoring. Like, you already have these expensive centrifuges anyway, so why not make money from them? Let's really enrich uranium, but within a consortium under supervision and monitoring. Everything will be transparent, everything will be open, and we'll make money from all of this. After all, it was the United States itself that helped Iran create that very peaceful nuclear program in the 20th century. But Iran categorically refused such a deal. A question to all the supporters of Iran. Why? The answer is obvious. That's why any negotiations with Iran must again have clear time limits. If, after a conditional 60 days, Iran doesn't agree to a deal, that's a signal that something is being plotted in Tehran. And now, insiders say that the deadline for a new nuclear deal is the end of August. And here we have the European factor coming into play. Trump received a guarantee that France and the United Kingdom are ready to impose sanctions on Iran. Let me explain here. This is all very interesting. The thing is, France and the United Kingdom have the authority under United Nations Security Council Resolution 2331, which approved the Obama-era nuclear deal, as they say, to roll back all international sanctions against Iran if diplomacy fails, thus returning Iran to the multilateral sanctions regime that Iran faced before the nuclear deal during Barack Obama's era. And this is a very important marker. To understand how frightening this is for Iran, it's worth noting that Iranian officials are already threatening to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty if that very sanctions rollback is applied. And here's the key point. France and the United Kingdom's right to a sanctions rollback expires in October of this year. After that, returning to the multilateral sanctions regime at the United Nations level will require a vote in the United Nations Security Council, where Russia and China will definitely block such a decision, saving their ally. That's why the Iranian nuclear issue must be resolved by the end of the summer. And by the way, the Russian dictator Putin understands this perfectly well, and he has already offered Donald Trump his mediation in negotiations with Iran several times. But Trump made it clear to Putin that he doesn't need his services in the Middle East. Do you know why? Because at least until October, the diplomatic keys to solving Iran's nuclear program are held exclusively by the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. And even the United Nations Security Council won't be able to do anything about it until October. Can we say that the new Middle East has already taken shape before our eyes? I'll answer that question with one simple phrase. With the support of the United States, Israel has become a regional power since October 7, 2023, something Iran had long aspired to but could not achieve. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially with any donation. You can use the links and payment details in the description of this video or the quick response code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourself. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles created by me.